Welcome to Bible Fiber, where we are encountering the textures and shades of the biblical tapestry. I'm Shelley Neese, president of the Jerusalem Connection, a Christian organization devoted to sharing the story of the people of Israel, both ancient and modern. This week, we are pausing our study of Ezekiel to talk to my friend Derek Gilbert, who was recently on a solidarity mission to Israel. Derek has been in the world of broadcasting for decades. He is producer and host of the web radio programs A View from the Bunker and P.I.D. Radio. He also co-hosts Unraveling Revelation with his wife, Sharon Gilbert. They are both part of the SkyWatchTV team. We met back in 2019 when I had the chance to visit their studios in Missouri, and another time at one of SkyWatch's Defender conferences, which if you've never been, has the nicest people there. Derek, I noticed your trip was not your standard tour of Israel, and I know you've been to Israel so many times, but that is why I really wanted to talk to you and hear about what you observed and did. So to start us off, can you tell us when you went and who you went with and how this trip, I mean, I know you've been to Israel lots, but this trip was different.
Yeah, it was. And thank you for having me on your study, Shelley. I appreciate you letting me interrupt your series through Ezekiel, which is one of the most fascinating books of the Bible for a number of reasons. But yes, we've been to Israel 4 times. This was our 4th trip. We partner with Lipkin Tours, our friends Aaron and Etty Lipkin, who live in Samaria, which the world calls the West Bank. They have facilitated our tours in 2018, 2019. In fact, in 2019, after we met you and Jim Barfield at SkyWatch TV over your book, The Copper Scroll Project, Jim was just happened to be in Israel while our tour was there. So he met us at Qumran and gave a presentation on the Copper Scroll at Qumran, which was one of the highlights of that tour, and then came to the hotel that evening and did a more in-depth presentation, which was fantastic. We were late getting to Qumran because that road that runs alongside the west side of the Dead Sea developed another sinkhole. Because the Dead Sea, Dead Sea is shrinking, and as the waters recede and the salt in the soil is replaced by the salt water in the soil is replaced by fresh water from the hills, it kind of dissolves the soil, and so you get holes that will swallow buses. So anyway, this time
That's
we
true.
did not.
Ironically, Ezekiel does have something to say about that, but
yes, we went in early May. The first and into the second week of May in 2024, May 7th through 13th. And this was different in that normally we would spend a lot of time in the north. We usually spend a few days based at Nazareth and visiting sites on the Golan Heights in the Upper Galilee, places like Dan, Caesarea Philippi, or Banyas, Paneas, the Grotto of Pan at the base of Mount Hermon. We also go to visit a couple of archaeological sites on the Golan, like Gilgal Rephaim, the Wheel of the Giants. But while you could probably get to Gilgal Rephaim, even though it is only 5 miles from the border with Syria, Dan and Caesarea Philippi, and another site that we want to visit now on tours going forward, a nature reserve in the far north near the village of Metula, which is the farthest north, the northernmost Israeli settlement in Israel. Those are all off limits right now because they're under fire from Hezbollah. So we concentrated our tour this time in the center of Israel, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and then we visited a number of locations in the south, in the Negev, that were attacked on October 7th. And that was really what we wanted to do. We wanted to do something to see with our own eyes, without the filter of the corporate media here in the West, how Israel has been transformed since October 7th, and seeing some of those sites in the south, especially the Nova Music Festival and the town of Sderot. Very, very powerful.
Did you go to the actual field that the Nova Music Festival was at?
Yes. It's become sort of a memorial to the 364 people who died at the Nova Music Festival that day. Dozens of people, I think about half of the people who were taken hostage were captured there at the festival. But when you go there now, it's almost become, I hate to use the word pilgrimage site because it's not religious overtly in that sense, but clearly it has become a memorial to the people who lost their lives that day. I mean, it is the site of the single greatest loss of life in a terror attack in the history of the modern state of Israel. So it's significant. There are pictures of all of the people who lost their lives that day. There are booths and tents set up from people who are trying to commemorate the event. There was a gentleman there who was copying a Torah scroll. He was from one of the religious kibbutzim in the north. And of course, it's been evacuated because it's too close to the border with Lebanon. But people could go and for a donation, and this money was being used to help people who are having to live their lives in hotels away from the Lebanese border. This was one of the striking things, just to rabbit trail for a moment, Shelley.
Right.
On our previous 3 tours, when we'd stay at a hotel, the hotels would be filled with tourists. So we'd see people from all over the world coming to the Holy Land. We'd see people from, of course, North America and Europe, but also many, many Africans, many Chinese coming to visit Israel. This time, the hotel we stayed in, we were just in one hotel for the entire week in Israel. All of the other guests were people who'd been evacuated from the north. So there were families there with little children who were running around the hotel staff apologizing to us for the children making so much noise. Like, no, it's wonderful. We need more sounds like this in America. But our little group,
for any parents of small children too, to be in a hotel for more than 3 days is awful. It's awful. I mean, so thank goodness for that they've been able to be supportive of these, refugees, essentially internal refugees. But I just think about that all the time, like not having my own kitchen or laundry space would be terrible.
Oh, absolutely. And places for children to play. I mean, normally you'd have a yard. Okay, go outside and play. So where do they go? They go to the hotel lobby. I mean, they're in the middle of Jerusalem. Where do you go? Go across the street and play in the square where the protesters normally line up every night at 7:00.
Wow.
It was very different.
Did you get the chance to talk to any of them, about just their lives now?
We did a little bit. Some of them were not English speakers, but we did speak to some. Our tour guide helped facilitate some of that. As you know, Sharon and I are somewhat introverted, and that was something we had to try to overcome, especially when we visited the rehabilitation hospital in Tel Aviv. But our tour guide, Yeshai Avital, best tour guide in Israel, I'm sure, he is not so constrained. And so he was happy to walk up and start sharing. There was a gentleman there dressed like many Israeli men in all black, but he was carrying an automatic weapon, which is not something we in America see, especially in public spaces like hotels and things like this. This guy walking around with an automatic weapon strapped across his back. He was a security officer from one of the kibbutzim in the north that had been evacuated there with his family. And so we talked with him for a little bit and said, well, it's better than living with the threat of a rocket coming through the bedroom window at night. So they're doing what they have to do. And the children are still, lining up outside the hotel every morning with their little backpacks on to go to a school where they are now being schooled in Jerusalem instead of their home in the northern part of Israel. But this is the reality that we in the West don't really get our heads around. One of the things that struck me, and I'll come back to the Nova Music Festival here after this, but when we visited Metula, that northernmost Israeli settlement in Israel last March, we went there because we wanted to go to the Ayun Stream Nature Reserve, which a scholar has identified as the most likely place in the mind of the writer of that section of the book of First Enoch as Avel Mayim, the waters of weeping, where Enoch delivered the judgment of God to the watchers who had sinned. God saying, okay, I've heard your petition, but sorry, you're not getting back up here. And this location, this beautiful stream, which flows down from Lebanon, descends through a number of waterfalls into the Hula Valley to become one of the sources of the Jordan River. So it's a beautiful place, but because of its connection to the book of First Enoch, the book of the Watchers, the explanation of what happened in Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, the giants who were created by the sons of God who commingled with human women, we went through this little town, and it's right on the border. There's a fence along the road that runs on the outer side of this village. There's a little valley there, and maybe 200 feet away, there's another fence and another road, and there's a white van over there. And Yeshai, our guide, who's got a wicked sense of humor, says, Derek, you see that van? Yeah. Hezbollah. Like, what? Well, it turned out it wasn't. It was the United Nations. We could see the UN markings on the side of the van. But that begs the question, what good is the UN doing if they're there right on the border and Israel has had to move 80,000 people away from the border? Hezbollah has effectively created a no-go zone, a buffer zone inside Israel now, where Israelis are not safe to live. So anyway, this gentleman with his automatic weapon and his family there in the hotel, that was their reality. The thing about Metula that struck us is that this is an agricultural community. It's a farming community. And here in America, when you've got like the rural Midwest, now we live in the Ozarks, it's mostly cattle country, but back in Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, you get flat, my grandparents, North Dakota, flat, fertile ground, farms for as far as the eye can see, but it's a farm here, and then a few miles down the road, there's another farm, and then a few miles down the road, there's another farm. In Israel, the farmers all live together inside a walled village, all of their equipment, the tractors, the combines, the harvesters, all inside the village behind the walls with a gate that you have to enter with security at the gate, because that's the reality of Israel for the last 75 years. If they don't live that way, they run the risk of dying. Here in America, for us in rural America, farming communities, there are towns interspersed in rural America, but the farmers live out on their farms and they don't live behind walls. Right. It's just a totally different reality.
That's part of the beauty of it even.
Right. A day is coming, according to prophecy, where there will be a time of unwalled villages, but that time is not quite yet.
No, not what you were witnessing. And even those 80,000 displaced people, there's thousands more that are very close to the border as well. They just don't qualify as close enough to evacuate, especially for 8 months, and things are really heating up on the border.
They were attacked on October 7th. This was the greatest single day loss of life in Israeli history, is certainly in a terrorist attack. And yet now the world is coming against them and accusing them of genocide. The slant of the corporate media reporting is just unbelievable. I mean, the recent report by that group affiliated with the United Nations finding that the food situation in Gaza has actually improved substantially over the past 90 days, and the media reporting it, famine imminent in Gaza. It's like, that's not what the report said. The report said things are actually much better than they were back in February. But anyway, but again, that was the reception that we got at the Shiva Rehabilitation Hospital in Tel Aviv. And again, for introverts like Sharon and me, this was really stepping outside of our comfort zone, because they took us up to the floor where a number of these soldiers who'd been wounded in action were recuperating. And we didn't have a plan. They didn't have activities scheduled for us. The doctors and nurses like, oh, hi, who are you? Okay, Yeshai, what do we do now? Well, go down the hall. If you see an open door, go in and introduce yourself. Ugh.
Oh, wow.
So people might think this is strange because Sharon and I do a lot of public speaking. We host programs, broadcast. I've been in broadcasting since 1980, was on the air in Philadelphia, St. Louis, suburban Chicago. But it's different when you're in a room with a microphone, or for some reason, for me, psychologically, it's different when I'm at a podium in front of a group of dozens, hundreds, thousands. It's different. Speaking one-to-one, the hardest thing I ever had to do was outside sales, going in and talking to somebody one-on-one. So here we are in that situation. Hi, how are you? And we were welcomed very warmly, and almost to a person, the response is, why are you here? And when we explained, well, look, we're just Christians who've come here to show our support for Israel. We just want to, we brought some kosher chocolate. Oh, great. But they were very happy. And like I said, the sense we got was that they feel like they're in shock because they were attacked. They're trying to eliminate this threat so they can live peacefully with their neighbors. And the world is telling them, no, you have to let Hamas survive. And even after taking a pounding for 9 months, right, if Hamas comes out of this surviving in any way, shape, or form, they'll claim victory. And they'll probably wind up not just in control of Gaza, but in control of Judea and Samaria as well. But this was really powerful because some of the soldiers we met, very positive in their outlook. Very positive, even though some of them were, bedridden, still in wheelchairs. Some of them were missing digits. But the one person that made the most impact, I think, on us was a young woman named Maya Regev, who was...
You met Maya Regev?
We did. Yes, you're one of the few people
Wow.
I know who knows who she is. She was at that hospital that day. She was kidnapped. She was taken hostage on October 7th at the music festival and returned on day 50, she and her brother. At the time we met her, I was not aware of who she was. I had to look her up afterwards. She was... One of the soldiers referred to her as, she's the queen of the rehabilitation floor thing. But I've lived long enough now, and I think have enough sense of how to read people that when you saw that young lady who still, by the way, got a wound, her leg in bandages up to her hip. She was shot in the leg on October 7th, not properly treated by Hamas. I've read a little bit about what she has shared about her experience. I think your viewers can just use their imagination. It's probably as bad as they imagine. She looked haunted. She looked like she was trying to keep it together. Now, maybe she was just having a bad day, didn't sleep well, in pain. Don't know. I'm not going to try to read too much into it, but I cannot imagine the experience that she endured. And I know that the others, looking back on it, I could sense that the soldiers who were there with her and trying to make jokes with her and cheer her up probably had a better sense of what she'd endured than we who visited that day. So that was a very powerful thing. The other thing we noticed as we were at that hospital is that the staff members included observant Jews, secular Jews, and we also noticed some Arabs there. And some of us had brought some non-kosher gifts, non-kosher honey. The young Arab nurse that we met was more than happy to take that. So, as far as we could tell, they all got along and worked together just fine. The criticism that we have been seeing over the last 9 months about Israel, it's a secular state and they persecute Arabs and they persecute Christians. We have not seen that to be true anywhere. And of course, when I try to share that, those who are making those claims say, well, they're only showing you what they want you to see and your friends are lying to you. Like, okay, look, I'm not necessarily the most observant or perceptive person in the world, but I did spend 20 years in sales. You develop a little bit of a sense when people are trying to blow smoke. Yeah. So I'm sorry. I think the people who are making those claims are looking for reasons to justify their anti-Israel and anti-Semitic beliefs, because I just don't see it. The fact is that Israel is the only nation in the Middle East where the population of Christians is growing. They don't encourage Christianity. Let's not be, let's not sugarcoat it. But the fact is Christians, for the most part, are free to participate in society without obstacle. The Arabs make up about 20% of the population there. And
on October 6th, they were giving more Gazans work visas than they had ever given before. And they didn't start this war, but they just have to win it. And that's all there is to it. But
Absolutely. Hostage Square was also very powerful. Of course, that's a display there outside the Tel Aviv Art Museum where you've got the long table that people have seen with the empty chairs representing those who have not yet returned from Gaza. There are other art displays there. There is a replica of a Hamas tunnel, which really hit me as we walked into it because I realized, okay, I know that I'm coming out the other end in another minute or so. But at the time, there were 130 people who had gone into those tunnels, some of whom have never come out and never will come out. So that was really a powerful thing. That day, we went from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and we spent a few hours volunteering with Bridges for Peace, which is a Christian organization.
They're a great organization. They've been around forever.
They have, and I was surprised I had not heard of them. Bridges for Peace, we help pack food baskets, gifts of food for Jews in need, some who just recently made Aliyah, who don't have a support network yet. Some of them, some of those few remaining Holocaust survivors, elderly people who don't have family in Israel anymore. So, and here they are, these Christians coming and turning up with here's a delivery of food to keep you going for another week. And Jesus loves you.
That's great. And I
So
know
that
they
was-
do a lot of lone soldier work as well, like soldiers that are there without families also receive
Yes.
those.
So that is something we plan to put on our full tour the next time we can go back with a full group. We're going to put a day. So
I was
can you
going
figure
to
out
ask.
how to
It'd be
use...
nice if you just could implement that.
Right. Because we asked, can you find a way to use 100 people at a time? Because the previous trips we've had between 80 and 115. So they said, well, we don't know how we could do it all in this building, but we'll figure it out. It's like, okay, we'll put that on the next full tour. But we are considering another Solidarity mission in November, and definitely we will be going back to Bridges for Peace if we pull that together. The day that we spent in the South, I mean, beyond the Nova Music Festival, which, again, rather somber memorial to the 364 people who died, we went to Sderot, which is a town of about 35,000. Very close to the Gazan border. We went to the overlook where you can look down into the Gaza Strip and see the border fence just a half a mile away. So the terrorists, when they crossed into Israel on October 7th, didn't have a whole lot of ground to cover. But in fact, on that day, we could hear the explosions in the distance from the operation in Rafah. Our tour guide said,
seeing that, you were able to picture what happened on October 7th a little better, too, of just...
Sure.
Once they infiltrated, how easy it all started happening from there.
I mean, there's the fence there. This is all the distance they had to cover to get from there across the highway and into the community here. And when they got there...
Did they talk about, too, that they didn't even know that festival was going to be happening?
The Nova Music Festival was supposed to be held elsewhere in the Negev, and just a couple of days before the event, they were told that the property they were supposed to use was no longer available. So they moved the site just a couple of days in advance. There are those who think, Israelis who believe that because the Nova Music Festival was there, once the terrorists realized they had a soft target with thousands of potential victims, they communicated with one another and then gravitated towards it rather than going into Sderot or possibly even Ashkelon, which is on the northern border with Gaza. They redirected their effort at the music festival because they had a soft target there. Bunch of people, 6 o'clock in the morning. Many of them had been up partying at this techno dance rave all night long. Groggy, very few police there for security. And they just overran it. I mean, as we were driving into the music festival, Shelley, the 2-lane road where people may have seen the video of the cars that were burnt and the scorch marks are still on the asphalt. So I don't know how you remove that, but as we drove in, we could see scorch marks on the asphalt. Somebody died there, and somebody died there, and somebody died there. It is very, very somber. In Sderot, there were some 70 people who died there, including 30 people at the police station. We visited the site of the police station that was overrun. Remarkable story there. A thing that really struck me, because my mother's in a nursing home here in the Ozarks, and 15 of the people who died in Sderot were senior citizens in a van who had tried to get away, and their van blew a tire. And so I'm thinking, my mother's 87, and she's suffering from Alzheimer's, dementia. I know they've got a van there that they use to transport residents to go to Walmart or to go to a play or things like that. And so I'm imagining this kind of a thing, a senior living center trying to get people away as they're hearing explosions and gunfire and the tire blows. And so you've got a group of senior citizens trying to repair the tire, and these terrorists walk up and shoot these 15 senior citizens who are clearly no threat. And that just really hit me kind of hard.
That's
the police station
evil in the face.
It is. And on the opposite end of the scale, we visited a playground in Sderot. And you walk in and you see these brightly colored, this brightly colored playground equipment. And when you get closer, you notice that this 50-foot long caterpillar, this green caterpillar, is made of 6-inch thick reinforced concrete. Because when the sirens blow, the red alert sounds, you've got 15 seconds to get into a shelter. So the children know if they're on the playground, run inside the caterpillar and get away from the doors. And they showed us the front end of the caterpillar, shrapnel marks on this piece of playground equipment where the children of Sderot play from an explosive that hit on that on that playground on October 7th. So who lives like that?
And what gets me is that's how they were that's what I'm saying is that's how they were living for years and years and had accepted living that way. And so Israel chasing Hamas to the ends of the earth now has been a long time coming in many other ways, but and Sderot is just evidence of that. I mean, they were always on the front lines with Gaza.
Well, true. Again, just a half a mile from the Gaza Strip. And when Ariel Sharon made the decision to withdraw in 2005 and pull the settlers out of the north end of the Gaza Strip, since then, I mean, for the last 20 years almost, Hamas has been taking all the international aid flowing into Gaza and diverting it to build this network of underground tunnels, reinforced tunnels, to turn it into essentially a fortress, instead of turning it into what could have been someplace like Monaco or Singapore, this jewel on the Mediterranean. Gaza has been a key seaport, and it's got the climate basically of San Diego and wonderful beaches. I mean, you could turn it into a beautiful place. I mean, put these wonderful hotels, or I don't endorse casinos, but I mean, they make money. You could basically have turned Gaza into a wealthy enclave where people, but that's not the Muslim religion. It's not the Arab mindset. This idea that any land that once belonged to Islam must always belong to Islam is paramount in that religion. Not every Palestinian Arab, not every Arab around the world agrees with that interpretation of Islam, but that's what Hamas represents. They want the caliphate restored. Israel just happens to be on the front lines here. We in the West, if we think that there'll be peace if Israel just stands down, I'm sorry, there's 1,400 years of Islamic history that says otherwise. I mean, the reason the West is called the West... Well, yeah, most of the community has returned. They had returned in April.
Oh, really?
So most of the town is back to trying to rebuild their lives. They were evacuated after October 7th, obviously. They returned in April, so just weeks before we got there. In fact, while we were visiting the police station where 30 people died inside the police station, some of them police officers, other civilians, we heard a story from the deputy mayor, David, and I forget his last name now. But anyway, our tour guide knew who he was because he's been on the news quite a bit. He told us the story of what happened with the police station. The terrorists overran the police officers inside. They barricaded themselves inside the police station. And as IDF forces, counterterrorism forces, came to try to take out the terrorists barricaded inside the police station, a Hamas sniper had positioned himself on top of an apartment building across the street. I mean, this is in the middle of a residential neighborhood, 3 apartment buildings on the opposite side of the street. And so that sniper reportedly took out about 15 people trying to breach the wall and get the terrorists out of the police station. An off-duty soldier saw what was going on and realized that they needed to get that terrorist, the sniper, off the roof. So he found another off-duty soldier because this fellow apparently only had his pistol. And you're not going to, at distance, you're not going to get an accurate enough shot with a pistol to take a guy out. He wanted the soldier's rifle. And the other soldier said, I can't, regulations. And the first guy was like, regulations, excuse me. And so the deputy mayor said, we don't know exactly how he got the weapon, but he got the weapon. Either persuasively or by force. He got the weapon from the other soldier. Sure. He went into the neighboring apartment building, made his way up to the 3rd floor of this 3-story building, got into one of the apartments, told the residents there what's going on and what he was trying to do. So he took this M16 rifle without a scope, knocked out the window in the bathroom, leaned out the window, and managed to neutralize the sniper on the roof of the next building. That's been memorialized in a mural painted on the wall of the building from which that sniper shot. They depicted an angel with a bow and arrow leaning out of the window to take out that terrorist. And once that was done, they finally were able to bring in troops to assess the situation. And sadly, because the police station was so well fortified and barricaded, what they finally did was they brought in an IDF tank and they just destroyed the police station. It is now a vacant lot, and there's a sign there that says this is going to be turned into a memorial for the people of Sderot who died on October 7th. So again, that was that was eye-opening, seeing, again, in the middle of a residential neighborhood, this war that had taken place. The buildings around it, you could still see the bullet holes in the walls. And then we went to Ofakim, which is the site of a story that is really remarkable. We'd heard her story on I-24 News, like within days of October 7th. This is the home of Rachel Edry, who is a woman who, she's in her 60s. She runs the canteen at a military base in the Negev. And Ofakim is a small kibbutz. We got there. We found neighbors who had set up little booths to sell water and lemonade and things like that. And again, buses of other Israelis coming to see this community. And the neighbors from of the Edrys, Rachel and her husband David, who sadly had passed from a heart attack just before we got there the week before, telling us the story. They shared with us security camera footage from above the front door of the Edry home, showing the terrorists in the early stage of the attack shooting their family dog. The dog was terrified. He was trying to get into the house. He was trying to get away from the terrorists. He was terrified by the gunfire. And they shot the dog. And then shortly thereafter, they broke into the house. Camera. They've got this on the, So through a translator, the neighbor was showing us on his phone, this is the security camera footage. We went into, or as we were talking with them, we slowly realized, wait a minute, this is where that story took place that we heard back in October. We didn't, this was one of the most remarkable things. Rachel Edry's become a hero in Israel. There are murals of her in Haifa and Tel Aviv. Joe Biden met her. James Cleverly, the foreign secretary of the UK, met her in the days after. She speaks Arabic, and so when the terrorists broke into her home, 5 of them, she addresses them in Arabic and says, "You boys look hungry. Can I fix you something to eat?" And they're like, okay. So she starts cooking for them. She had food already prepared. Would you like some cookies? Would you like some bread? I've got some milk here. How about you look tired. Why don't you take a little nap? Here. And she stalls them, and she keeps talking with them and stalling them for 20 hours. This woman in her 60s looks like your typical Jewish grandmother, because that's what she is. And she stalls them for 20 hours while her son, who is a police officer, figures out what's going on and gets counterterrorism troops lined up. She sees her son outside the window from the kitchen, doesn't give him away, but she signals 5. There are 5 of them. He gives the counter-terrorist forces, the troops, the intel on the layout of the house. Okay, you got to go in through the living room here, make a right turn, and they go in after 20 hours of stalling these terrorists, neutralize them, and her son rescued his mother and father that way. And Rachel Edry, like I said, she's become a national hero in Israel. And we were there at her home. The home, you can still see the bullet holes going all up the walls. The back wall of the house was blown out. It's they've got 2x4s basically bracing the back wall, what's still standing. And the neighbors there, and this didn't hit me until later. How many people's lives did she save by thinking quickly and by saying, "Oh, hey, how about some food? You look hungry." And stalling.
It's almost like a biblical story. It feels like something that's straight out of Joshua.
It's like Yael in the Old Testament with Sisera. Stalling them.
All but drive the nail through his head.
Exactly. And we're thinking, like I said, this didn't hit us until later. How many of those neighbors who we met that day would be dead? Would we not have met because if she had not had the presence of mind to engage them rather than shrieking in terror and trying to run away? She saved her husband's life. She saved the lives of her neighbors.
So Ofakim, this is going to be a new form of tourism in Israel in a lot of ways, of like visiting the home of Rachel and visiting these places where these stories happened. Yeah. And maybe that's for the best too. I love that you guys went there and brought your own form of tourism to these hurting, traumatized places and people. So where'd you go from there?
We spent a day at Gush Etzion, and then from there we went to Mount Herzl, which is essentially Israel's equivalent of Arlington National Cemetery. Gush Etzion is a community south of Jerusalem, between Jerusalem and Hebron, the site of a massacre in 1948, Kfar Etzion, which was a kibbutz where about 130 people were massacred on the day that Israel declared independence. There is a wonderful multimedia display that dramatizes the events that led up to that final attack by the Arab Legion, and that's the army of Jordan, and Arab militia. For people who have not yet seen it, just say you will not come away from there with dry eyes. There is no other way to put it. In fact, our tour guide, who's like all adults in Israel, is former IDF. He's in his 70s now. He served in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War. He cries almost every time we go there. So we went from there to Mount Herzl.
That was a powerful ending too, because you're connecting Israel's all of its 7 decades by connecting what has recently happened and how they started.
And seeing the parallels between how Israel was treated then. And some of this, again, is based on research we've done since May. Again, Sharon doing a lot of research on the rise in anti-Semitism in the 19th century for her series of historical fiction, the Red Wing Saga. But as we see this kind of sentiment, anti-Semitic sentiment, anti-Israel sentiment among Christians over the last 9 months, just trying to counter it with facts, may not change the minds of those who are dead set in their opposition to Israel, but at least it will expose it for what it is. So from Kfar Etzion and seeing what Israel was going through, or the Zionists were going through leading up to the Declaration of Independence, and what they're going through today, and then visiting Mount Herzl, which again is like Arlington National Cemetery, that was very powerful. In fact, our tour guide got very emotional again, Yeshai in his early 70s, finding a fresh grave at Mount Herzl for the husband of a young lady who is the daughter of or granddaughter of a third cousin, which just illustrates how important family is to Israel, or to Jews in Israel.
What a small country it is.
And what
Everyone
a small country
was
it is.
touched in some way.
Right. And
and when you go back in November, are you going to do, what type of trip is the November trip going to be?
Well, assuming we can pull this together, we were just discussing this just in the last couple of days as Lipkin Tours is reaching out to other ministries that have partnered with them for full tours in the past. I think Sharon and I must have been like the only ones, or one of the only ones, who actually took them up on this suggestion. A lot of other folks, we can't go to the places we would like to go. Look, our tour guide from last year said that they were going to sites in and around the Sea of Galilee. They were on the Sea of Galilee. They went to Tiberias. They went to the historical or the archaeological digs at Gamla. That's still safe. Jerusalem is safe. Tel Aviv is safe. We would probably do very much what we did in May, but would like to go again to the rehabilitation hospital, of course, Hostage Square, and we'd like to see those sites in the South again. So it is very, and of course the sites in Jerusalem that are key to this spiritual war. We were on the Temple Mount, which we almost had to ourselves this time. Unlike past visits when it's very crowded and you have to wait, it's almost like 45 minutes as you cross that wooden bridge that they've got leading up to the one entrance that non-Muslims are allowed to use. This time we walked straight in, and we were almost alone on the Temple Mount. And of course the Mount of Olives. Come October, the Church of the Pater Noster, which was closed for renovation, should be open again. And that's important to us because we think the Church of the Pater Noster is the site of the actual tomb of Jesus. There's a grotto below the Church of the Pater Noster on the Mount of Olives. We couldn't see it in May because it was closed, unknown to us. But so the Mount of Olives, Temple Mount, City of David, those sites in Jerusalem, sites in the South, and again, the sites connected to the history of Israel, like Gush Etzion and the Palmach Museum. We will have information at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel, if we commit to this. And we'll probably make that decision here in the next few days because November comes up pretty quick.
I know. And for a lot of people, it sounds like the kind of trip that is maybe maybe for your third time to go to, just if you already love Israel, if you want to get to Israel to hug Israelis and to see these places that aren't maybe on the traditional church tours, but are just these, I don't know, almost like a prayer tour. It's appropriately named a solidarity tour. That's the kind of trip that calls to me right now. All I want to do every day is just hug Israelis and let them know that they're seen, known, loved, and on the right course. So yeah, I hope that happens, and certainly direct people to your website. Well, Derek, in general, can you tell people how to find out more about you, your ministry, and your work?
Yeah, the easiest way is just go to our main website, gilberthouse.org, gilberthouse.org. Sharon and I produce more content per week than probably should be allowed. We do a weekly audio Bible study. We got an audio podcast that we've been doing since 2005 called P.I.D. Radio, Peering into Darkness. My podcast, which is also on YouTube, Unraveling Revelation, which is a look at end times Bible prophecy. And right now we're going through the where this situation in Israel fits into end times prophecies. But all of that is at that one website, gilberthouse.org. In fact, we've got an app there which is available for mobile devices, Roku and Apple TV. All of our content comes into that app. So again, all of that linked at our website, gilberthouse.org.
Fantastic. And I do think I look forward to Sharon's next book, because it sounds like truth and fiction are just merging in our world right now. So whatever magical world that she is building in that novel, I know will look kind of similar to what we're walking through now. But thank you so much for being on the show, Derek. I know that you're really busy and it's conference season, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and really enjoyed it. We'll keep you posted.